The battle was over. The soldiers were already counting their victory, and in the snow, behind a collapsed supply cart, something was dying. A cub, wounded, alone. Every packmate had walked past him. Every soldier had stepped over him. Every healer had looked away. He had been left there the way you leave things you've already decided don't matter. Except one person hadn't decided that yet. Mira, an Omega with no rank, no title, no reason the world would give her to stop. Stopped. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know that the cub bleeding into the snow carried the blood of the Alpha King himself. She didn't know that what she did next would change everything. She only knew that something needed her, and that, for Mira, had always been enough. The Grafen pack had won the border skirmish by nightfall. By morning, the soldiers were already moving, counting losses, securing ground, preparing the long march home. No one lingered in the cold. The Ashvin border in deep winter was not a place that invited reflection. Mira moved through the aftermath the way she always moved through difficult things, quietly, efficiently, without waiting for permission or expecting acknowledgement. She was a field healer, Omega rank, the kind of person a pack relied on completely and recognized almost never. She had been doing this work for 5 years. She had learned in those 5 years not to need the recognition. She needed the work. The work was always there. She was collecting salvageable medical supplies from the field's eastern edge when she heard it. Not a cry, something smaller than that. A breath catching wrong, the specific, broken rhythm of something trying to stay alive on less air than it needed. She stopped, listened. There, behind the wreckage of a supply cart that had taken a direct hit from the Ironholt pack's siege weapons and collapsed into a tangled heap of splintered wood and canvas, she moved toward it. The cub was half buried in churned snow, dark fur matted with blood that had already started to freeze at the edges. Young, 8 months, perhaps 9. Old enough to have been field-trained, young enough that the training hadn't fully taken hold yet. One foreleg was bent at an angle that made her stomach tighten with the specific professional dread of knowing exactly what that meant. His eyes were open, tracking her approach, but the glassiness in them told her the tracking was more reflex than intention. And he was watching her arrive the way things watch when they have stopped expecting help but haven't yet stopped existing. Mira crouched in the snow beside him. She did not reach for him immediately. She held still for a moment, letting him see her clearly, letting him register that her hands were open, that her posture was low, that she was making herself small rather than large. She had learned this from years of working with frightened patients. The first thing you offered was not your skill. It was your stillness. The cub's breathing shifted slightly, still labored, but the whites of his eyes retreated a fraction. "I see you," she said quietly. "I've got you." She looked around. Soldiers moved in every direction. A column was forming at the camp's western edge, the march order already being called. Supply teams were loading carts. Pack guards were doing the perimeter sweep. The battlefield was full of people doing the next necessary thing. Not one of them had stopped here. She looked at the cub's neck and found what she was looking for, and what she'd feared finding. The pack-mark collar was gone, stripped. The fur was roughed at the throat where it had been removed, not carefully, in a hurry. Someone had taken the time to remove his identification before walking away. Someone had decided, deliberately, that this cub was not their problem. She felt the cold anger that she'd learned over 5 years to keep very quiet and very contained, because loud anger in an Omega field healer got you reassigned to laundry duty. She kept it quiet. She kept it contained. "All right," she said to the cub, beginning the careful work of assessment. Let's see what we're working with." The leg was broken. 2 ribs cracked. She could tell by the way he flinched from specific pressure and the shallow quality of his breathing. Lacerations along his left flank, deep enough to need cleaning and binding. Dehydrated. Cold shock setting in at the edges. She had seen worse. She had fixed worse, with less. She had not, until this moment, had to carry a patient 3 miles in her own arms because there was no one available to help. She wrapped him in her outer cloak, the good one, the lined one, the one she'd spent 2 months of wages on before the winter campaign, and lifted him against her chest. He was heavier than he looked, the specific density of a young pack wolf whose bones had already set with adult strength, even if the rest of him hadn't caught up yet, as he made a sound when she lifted him. Not aggression. Pain, poorly suppressed, the sound of something that had been trained not to show weakness, and hadn't quite managed it. "I know," she said. "I know. We're going. Keep breathing with me." She felt him try. She walked. The camp healer was a beta male named Austin, who had 20 years of experience and the specific confidence that 20 years of experience in a pack hierarchy gave you when you were beta and male, and had never once had your judgment questioned. He took one look at what Mira carried and told her to put it down. "Feral cub from the field," he said. "Unidentified, injured past useful. You'll spend 3 days and a week's worth of supplies on it, and it'll die anyway, and then you'll be behind on the actual patient roster." "The actual patient roster is current," Mira said. I checked an hour ago." "Mira, I'll use my own supplies," she said. "My own time. It won't cost the camp anything." Austin looked at her the way he often looked at her, with the particular expression of a man who had decided she was slightly too much trouble to fight directly, and slightly too useful to remove. "Your funeral," he said, and walked away. Mira carried the cub to the supply tent that doubled as her workspace, and set him down on the padded ground sheet she used for serious cases. "Right," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's get started." The first night was the hardest. Not because he was violent, he was too weak for violence, because he was terrified. Every time she moved too quickly, his whole body went rigid. Every time a sound came from outside the tent, boots on frozen ground. As the distant call of the watch change, his eyes went wide with the specific panic of something whose every instinct was telling it that the world was dangerous and it was alone in it. She kept the lamp low. She moved slowly. She talked. She talked about everything and nothing, the supply inventory she needed to finish by morning, the particular properties of the dried winter moss she was using to clean his wounds, the way the cold affected healing timelines, and what she could do to compensate. Her voice was not cheerful, and it was not performing comfort. It was simply steady, present, a sound that filled the space where silence would have been frightening. He listened. Not to the words, she knew he didn't understand most of them, but to the tone, the rhythm, the fact that the sound kept coming, kept being there, and did not stop or go angry or disappear. By the second hour, his breathing had slowed to something approaching even. By the fourth, he had stopped flinching every time she touched him to check the dressings. By dawn, he was asleep. She sat beside him and watched him breathe, and thought about the collar that had been stripped from his neck, and about whoever had done the stripping, and kept her anger very quiet and very contained. The second day, he ate from her hand. She had not pushed for this, had simply placed the food near him and retreated to her side of the tent and let him reach his own conclusions. He had watched the food for a long time, watched her, watched the food again. Then, with the laborious care of something that has decided to try something frightening and is going to do it very slowly, he stretched his neck forward and took it. She did not make a sound, did not react beyond the small internal thing that she did not allow onto her face. On the third day, he let her touch his ears. On the fifth, she woke to find him pressed against her side in the night, his broken legs stretched carefully out beside him, his breathing slow and even and warm against her arm. She lay still for a long time, looking at the tent ceiling. "You're going to be all right," she told him softly. He opened one eye. "Both of us are." She named him Ash. No one in the camp asked why. No one was paying enough attention to ask. Austin came to check on her progress at the end of the first week, wearing the expression of a man who had expected to find a dead cub and was mildly annoyed to find otherwise. "Legs set cleanly," Mira reported. Or ribs healing well. Another 2 weeks and he'll be full weight-bearing. The lacerations are closed. No infection. Austin looked at the cub, who looked back at him with flat, unimpressed eyes. Unidentified cub. No pack mark. No lineage, Austin said. What exactly is your plan, Mira? Bring him home, she said. And figure out the rest when I get there. Austin opened his mouth, closed it, walked away. Mira looked at Ash. He means well, she said. He's just not very good at it. Ash put his head down on his paws and sighed. She did not realize in that moment that the particular shade of his dark fur and the specific gray of his eyes and the way he held his head when he was assessing a situation were things that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone who had spent time in the Ironmark royal household. She had not spent time in the Ironmark royal household. She was a field healer who knew medicines and wounds and how to keep frightened things from dying. She knew what she knew. She did not know what she didn't know. She brought him home. The Grafen pack marched home 12 days after the border skirmish ended. Mira walked at the back of the column, as she always did. Field healers walked last, because the logic of pack hierarchy placed them where their rank suggested they belonged, which was behind everything that mattered. She had stopped finding this offensive years ago, and had simply learned to use the position. Walking at the back meant you saw everything without being seen. You learned things. Ash walked at her heel. No longer the broken, glassy-eyed thing she'd found in the snow. He moved with the careful, deliberate dignity of something that has been rebuilt and knows it, that carries its recovery as a form of pride rather than hiding it as a form of shame. Soldiers who'd ignored him for 12 days stepped aside when he passed, not because they recognized him, because there was something in the way he moved that made stepping aside feel like the right thing to do, and they couldn't have explained why. Mira noticed this, filed it away. The commotion at the gate started before they were fully through it. 3 riders in Ironmark, black and silver, the royal crest on their pauldrons, the specific quality of controlled urgency in their posture that meant something serious had been ongoing for some time. Their horses were road-worn. These riders had come far and fast, and had not stopped to rest on the way. The lead rider had dismounted, and was speaking to the Grafen Alpha, Lord Durgast, a broad man of 50 who was good at war and less good at most other things, with the focused intensity of someone who had been having versions of this same conversation at every pack gate along the border for the past 3 weeks. Mira would have stayed at the back. She was very good at staying at the back. Except Ash walked forward. She reached for his scruff and missed. He was already through the gap between 2 soldiers, moving with sudden, focused purpose through the crowd. The soldiers stepped aside. They kept doing that. He pushed between a cluster of senior packmates twice his size, past the supply masters, past the guard captains, and stopped directly in front of the lead Ironmark rider. The rider looked down. Something happened to his face. He dropped to one knee in the snow. Not a bow. Not the formal military acknowledgement of a ranking officer. Something older. Involuntary. The specific motion of someone whose body has recognized something before the mind has fully caught up to it. "My lord," he said, very quietly, not to anyone else, to the cub. The silence that followed had weight. The Grafen Alpha looked from the rider to the cub, to Mira, who had come forward through the crowd because Ash had walked into the middle of something, and she was not leaving him in the middle of something alone. And his expression moved through several things in rapid succession. "Mira," he said, "where did you find that cub?" "Eastern Field Edge," she said. 3 miles from camp, in behind the collapsed supply cart from the Ironholt siege weapon strike. When? First morning after the battle. Durgast looked at the Ironmark rider, who was still on one knee. "Is this—" "Yes," the rider said. He stood. His voice, when he addressed the Grafen Alpha, had shifted into the formal register of a man delivering an official communication that he had prepared very carefully. Kalen Ironmark, second son of the Alpha King's brother, heir to the Ironmark secondary line, Separated from his guard escort during the Ashfin raid 3 weeks ago. A pause. We have been searching every pack territory along the border. Another pause. He was here, the rider said, and the flatness in his voice was the flatness of someone holding a very large feeling, very still. He has been here. He looked at Mira. She looked back at him, how she thought about the stripped collar, about Austin telling her to put the cub down, about 12 days of walking at the back of the column with Ash at her heel while the Ironmark pack turned 7 territories inside out. She kept her face very even. He needed help, she said. The formal identification took the rest of the afternoon. 3 Ironmark lords arrived by nightfall, having apparently been stationed at the nearest waypoint, waiting for exactly this kind of news. They conducted their examination with the careful thoroughness of people for whom correctness was not optional. They checked the bloodline markers. They confirmed the lineage. They produced documentation that Mira did not fully follow, but that clearly satisfied everyone who needed to be satisfied. Ash, Kaelin, she corrected herself, though he would always be Ash to something in her, sat through all of it with the patient, slightly imperious dignity of a young royal who had decided that if humans were going to be formal about things, he would be formal about letting them. He kept coming back to her side. Every time a new lord approached, every time a new examination began, every time the room shifted and rearranged around him in the way rooms did when something important was being determined, he came back to her and pressed his flank against her leg and stayed there until the new thing resolved. The Ironmark lords noted this, said nothing about it. Mira stood in the center of the Grafen guest hall and held very still and waited for whatever came next. Alpha King Kadrin Ironmark arrived the following morning. She had expected ceremony. She had prepared herself, in the quiet of the night, for the specific kind of performance that powerful men used to discharge obligations, public, formal, carefully managed to express gratitude while minimizing actual debt. She had seen this before, in smaller forms, from smaller men. She knew how it worked. She had not prepared for a man who came alone. No formal guard, no herald, no retinue of advisors arranging themselves in the order of their importance. He came through the door of the guest house with a single aide who stayed outside, and he was travel-worn, she noticed immediately. Not from the one-day ride from the Ironmark waypoint. From longer than that. From 3 weeks of moving between pack territories, she understood, following a trail that had kept coming up empty. He was 35, perhaps 36. Dark-haired like his nephew, but with the same gray eyes that she recognized now, that she had been looking at for 12 days without knowing what she was looking at. He was built the way alpha bloodlines built men, broad and enduring, but what she noticed first was not his size. It was his face. He was not performing anything. In her experience, men with his rank and his power were always performing something. Authority, benevolence, control. Some arrangement of themselves for external consumption. This man's face was simply present. Exhausted. Real. Ash crossed the room to him before he was fully through the door. She watched Kadrin Ironmark receive his nephew, watched him crouch in the center of the guesthouse floor and put both hands on the young wolf's face and hold him there, forehead to forehead. Yes, in the silence of something that did not need words and did not use them. She looked away, gave them the moment. When she looked back, the Alpha King was standing, looking at her. She met his eyes. "You found him," he said. "He found me first," she said. "I just stopped." He crossed the room in the unhurried way of a man who has somewhere to be and has decided that this is it. He stopped at a respectful distance, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to give her room. "I've been briefed," he said. "The field, the collar, the camp healer who told you to put him down." She said nothing. "You used your own supplies," he said. "Your own time. You walked 3 miles carrying him in your own cloak." "It was a reasonable cloak," she said. "He needed it more than I did." Something moved through his expression. Not amusement, exactly, but adjacent to it. The look of a man encountering something that does not fit his prepared categories and is adjusting in real time. "Who took the collar?" he said. "I don't know," she said. "I didn't see it happen. By the time I found him, it was already gone." "But you understood what the removal meant." "Someone decided he wasn't their responsibility," she said, "and removed the evidence of whose responsibility he was." "Yes," he said. "That's what it meant." A pause. "My people are investigating," he said. "We will find who did it." She nodded. She believed him. She had the sense, looking at this man, that when he said he would find something, he found it. "Sit down," he said. "Please." She sat. He sat across from her. As Ash moved between them and lay down with his head on his paws, and his eyes moving from one to the other with the particular attention of a cub who is listening to everything. "What do you want?" Kadrin said. She looked at him. "I mean it," he said. "Name it. Lands, pack status, a formal bond appointment, a transfer to any pack territory in the 7 lands. Name what you want, and I will make it happen." She looked at Ash. "I want him to be all right," she said. "That's what I've wanted since the first morning." "He will be," Kadrin said. "Because of you." A pause. "And because of you, I want you to be all right too. That's what I'm asking." She was quiet for a moment. She had spent 5 years not being asked what she wanted. She was slightly out of practice at answering. "Chief healer," she said finally. "Not field rank. A proper appointment with resources and staff and the authority to make decisions without waiting for a beta to second-guess them." "Done," he said immediately. "Iron Mark territory," she added. "Not Grayfen." "Also done." She looked at him. "You agreed to that very fast." "I had already decided it before you asked," he said simply. "I was waiting to see what you would say." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. His eyes, when they met hers, were direct in the way that things are direct when they have been managed for a long time and have chosen, in this moment, to stop managing. "Because my nephew has spent 12 days attached to you," he said. "And Kalen does not attach to people. He never has. Not since his parents died. Not through 3 years of caretakers who came and went. He has never pressed himself against anyone's side in the night." A pause. "I wanted to know if the person he chose was the kind of person who would ask for what she actually needed." She looked at Ash. Who was looking at her with those gray eyes that she now recognized belonged to a bloodline that had ruled 7 territories for 6 generations. "And," she said. "And you asked for the thing that would let you do your work properly," he said. "Which tells me you're the kind of person who thinks about the work first and herself second. Which is exactly the kind of person I need." She sat with this for a moment. "You're also the kind of person," he continued more quietly, "who walked 3 miles in the cold carrying a stranger because something needed her. And I have been trying to find more of those people for a long time." She looked at him. He was not performing this. She had watched enough people perform things to know the difference. This was simply true, said plainly, by a man who had come alone to say it. "When do I start?" she said. Something in his expression settled. Not relief. He was not a man who showed relief openly. Something quieter. The specific settling of a person who has been uncertain about something and is no longer uncertain. "When you're ready," he said. "Take whatever time you need." "I've been ready for 5 years," she said. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. "Then we'll leave tomorrow," he said. "If that suits you." She looked at Ash one more time. At the young wolf who had been stripped of his identity and left in the snow to die, and who had pressed himself against her side in the night and let himself be known by someone who had no reason to look for him. "It suits me," she said. She did not know, riding into Iron Mark territory the following morning with Ash at her horse's heel and the Alpha King's guard around her, that the chief healer position had been vacant for 2 years because Kadrin Ironmark had not found anyone he trusted enough to fill it, She did not know that he would come to the healing wing himself, in the evenings, in the quiet way he apparently did everything, not to check on her work, but simply to be in the same space where good things were happening. She did not know that 3 months from now. Ash would sit between the two of them at the evening fire with the proprietary satisfaction of a young wolf who has arranged his world exactly as he intended, and that neither of them would be able to honestly say he'd done it wrong. She didn't know any of that yet. She knew what she knew. She had stopped in the snow for something that needed her. She had given 12 days of careful, unglamorous, unrewarded work, and on the other side of it, everything was different. Not because of the title, not because of the rank or the territory, or the formal appointment with the gold seal documentation. Because she was going somewhere she was wanted. Because a young wolf who had stopped trusting people trusted her. And because an alpha king who came alone and spoke plainly had looked at her and said, "I have been trying to find more of those people for a long time." She was one of those people. She had always been one of those people. The world had simply not been paying attention. She didn't stop because she knew who he was. She stopped because he needed someone too. That's the whole of it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that is exactly enough to change everything.